Two Gentlemen of Verona by William Shakespeare. There were two gentlemen who lived in Verona named Proteus and Valentine. They were the best of friends, having been companions for a long time in an uninterrupted friendship. They spent almost all their leisure hours together except for those when Proteus visited the lady of his love, a young maiden named Julia. The two gentlemen agreed on every topic except one. For Valentine, not being a lover himself, tired of hearing his friend speak of his love for Julia. In fact, he teasingly ribbed his comrade, ridiculing the passion of love.
Oh, how much I love my dear Julia. She is my lady and the delight of my life, the treasure of my soul, the wings of my flight, the content of my heart, the treasure of my soul.
Whoa, I'm not much of a lover. You're boring me.
But she is the treasure of my soul.
If this is what love is, I'll have no part. No such idle fantasies shall enter my head. I am going to Milan to serve the Duke.
Oh, dear Valentine, you are the friend of my heart.
Ugh, I'm going now.
Sweet Valentine, adieu. Think of me when you see some rare object worthy of notice in your travels.
While Valentine left that very morning to travel to Milan, Proteus sat down and wrote Julia a letter of his most flowery words, which he gave to Lucetta, a maid serving Julia, to deliver. Julia loved dear Proteus, but she, being a lady of noble spirit, thought it did not become her maiden dignity to be easily won. She affected only mild interest in him, giving him much uneasiness in his courtship. After all, the harder he worked, the more he would appreciate her.
Here, Julia, I have a letter for you from Proteus. A letter from Proteus. Bring me no more, for I have no desire to read his words. Leave me. But wait! Don't worry. I'll burn it for you. No, his words aren't worth even the heat of the fire.
Though, for the look in Lucetta's eyes, Julia realized that Lucetta didn't believe her.
Give it here. I'll tear it into shreds.
And so she did, to prove to Lucetta that Proteus was far from winning his suit for her.
Now get gone and let the papers lie.
After tearing it to pieces, she threw them on the floor and spun around to walk away. But after Lucetta left, Julia threw herself upon the floor, gathered the pieces, and shuffled them on the floor to put them back together as though it were a puzzle. However, try as she might, she could only fit together the pieces that said "Love, Wounded Proteus."
What have I done? My poor Proteus is wounded. I have destroyed his kind words, but I shall lodge them in my bosom, as in bed, till the words have healed, and kiss each one to make amends.
And then she wrote a letter of much kinder words to Proteus than she had ever before.
Oh my, this letter is unlike any before. Julia's sweet words convince my heart that she does love me after all. Sweet love, sweet wine, sweet life.
Just then his father, Antonio, appeared as Proteus read the letter from Julia once again.
What heartest thou, my son? My lord, just a letter from my friend dear Valentine in Milan. Lend me the letter to see what news.
But of course Proteus could not do that, for it was in truth a letter from Julia, whom he didn't want his father to know he was courting.
No news, no news. He simply writes how well beloved he is by the Duke of Milan. He wishes me to be with him, a partner of his fortune. How stand you? I am at your wish, not mine will.
Proteus knew he could make no objections to his father's wishes, and so he left Milan, but he stopped by Julia's home to first say goodbye. They exchanged rings as reminders and promised to each other their love. Now it so happened that Valentine was indeed quite in favor of the Duke of Milan. There in Milan a wondrous change had occurred in Valentine, for he had fallen in love with the Duke's daughter, Sylvia, who he had decided to marry despite her already having been promised to Thurio, even though she despised him. Now Proteus arrived in Milan and found his friend Valentine. Valentine told the Duke of Milan that Proteus was a good and fine fellow, and the Duke welcomed him. After he left, Proteus and Valentine could finally talk.
Oh, Proteus, my dear friend, how right you were. Love is grand, grand, grand. Love you? Yes, head over heels. I understand your love for Julia. How fares it? Well, I can't say well, though she did send me a nice letter before I left. And she loves you? Perhaps, but let's meet your lady.
And so Valentine took Proteus to see Sylvia, and Proteus changed his very heart to love the same girl as his dear friend Valentine. A false friend he had become as he schemed to steal Sylvia away from Valentine. But not knowing this, Valentine told Proteus of his plan to marry Sylvia in secret, despite her father, the Duke of Milan's wishes. He told Proteus he would use a rope ladder to climb to her window, retrieve her, and that very night they would sneak away to marry. Proteus immediately had a plan to reveal Valentine's plan to the Duke.
A plan comes to me immediately to reveal Valentine's plan to the Duke of Milan.
And so Proteus found the Duke and told him everything. That night the Duke waited, and when he saw Valentine, approached him as though he knew nothing of the young man's plan to steal his daughter. He approached him in the night to talk with him.
Whither away so fast? Perhaps you might help me.
The Duke then explained he had found a lady he wished to woo, but being older and having been a long time since he tried to woo a woman, he admitted he was out of practice.
What should I do? You are young and I am sure you know.
Flowers, chocolate, money, and shoes. Lots of shoes.
I have all those and tried, except the shoes.
Then fix your error, and she will be yours. That is the power of shoes.
Then the Duke went on to explain that she was younger than him by 15 years, and that her father, despite him being the Duke, didn't want her to marry him. He implored young Valentine what he must do. Though at first Valentine feigned he knew not what to do, the Duke pressed him until at last he had no choice.
Steal her away in the night, good sir.
How?
Hide a rope ladder under your shirt, climb to her, and take her.
I think my shirt is not large enough.
Then I suggest a cloak.
Like yours?
Why, yes, indeed. I suppose one like mine.
Lend me your cloak, and I will be about that business this very night.
Upon saying those words, he pulled the cloak from Valentine and revealed the rope ladder beneath it. Poor Valentine's ruse was at an end, and the story came out. The Duke banished Valentine from his kingdom and escorted him from the city, telling him to ne'er return. But Julia, back in Verona, had decided she couldn't wait, and that it was time to go find Proteus and tell him herself of her love for him. But it wasn't in custom for a woman to travel alone, so she disguised herself as a man, taking the name Sebastian. She arrived in Milan and found immediately that many people intended to go view some young gentleman who was to play some fine music in an effort to suit a young maiden. Having nothing better to do, and thinking perhaps she might see Proteus, she decided to attend, still disguised as Sebastian. What she found, she simply couldn't believe.
My love for you, Sylvia, is as strong as an ox yoke of red oak. It is like a flower that never wilts and dies. Your breath is like the spring wind that awakens the sleeping trees from their cold winter slumber.
Yes, that's right. The young man was Proteus, and he was wooing Sylvia.
I will be your huckleberry.
When Proteus left, Julia, as Sebastian, went to Sylvia to scout her rival.
Well, that man seems to have such fine words for you.
Fine, fine? They are like cheap perfume.
But he seems to honestly love you.
Within me there is not love, or even like, only disgust, for he is a friend of my real love.
But you must admit he is good looking.
Yes, kind of remembers me a little of Tom Cruise.
You mean the young Tom Cruise?
Not the old one, after all the plastic surgery.
It was then that Julia learned, all the while dressed as Sebastian, that it was Valentine who Sylvia loved. Julia said she knew of Proteus, and that he, too, had a true love he had left behind in Verona.
What does she look like?
Julia is my height and of my complexion. The color of her eyes is my own. Were she a man, she would look much like me.
Sylvia pitied the poor lady that Proteus had so unceremoniously dumped. Proteus had given Sylvia the ring from Julia, but Sylvia refused it, instead giving it to Sebastian to return to him. Now we return to Valentine, who, having been set upon by a band of robbers who saw him for his nobility and asked him to lead them, being so heartbroken as to never be able to return to Milan and his love Sylvia, he agreed, but only if they agreed, to rob only from the rich and hurt no women and children, and thus he was employed as a bandit captain. Back in Milan, Sylvia had other problems.
You will marry me.
Never.
Oh, such a strong word, this never.
I would rather die.
I will tell on you to your father.
Well, maybe die is a strong word, but I will run away to Verona, where I am sure Valentine has gone.
She packed her bags and, in the company of an old retainer, set out to Verona through the forest, the very forest where Valentine captained the bandits. When the bandits found her, the old man deserted her, and she fell into such anguish that thieves could hardly touch her, or even stand to be around her. They decided to take her to their captain to handle the situation. But on their way, Proteus, who had followed her to win her love, fell upon them with his page, Sebastian, who was still the forlorn Julia. Then, as Valentine, the bandit captain, arrived, and they were all four together. You can imagine the story that unfolded as Valentine found out about the deviousness of his best friend in courting his very own love.
You're what? You're courting Sylvia?
Well, I admit that.
And you want to marry her?
I admit that too. But you are a thief.
I admit that.
Actually, a captain of thieves?
Well, I admit that too.
Now Julia, still a Sebastian, who had become Proteus's page in order to be near him, listened carefully to this conversation. Julia listened as well, thrilled to have found her Valentine.
To the issue at hand. Do you love her?
I do.
Then as your dear friend, I can only leave her to you.
And at this, Julia realized that she had lost Proteus forever, and she fainted, which of course seemed strange to them all that a strong young man would faint. Sylvia was the first to her, and grabbing her head to check her, discovered her disguise.
Why, this is no man but a woman. That is not just a woman, but Julia.
Julia Sebastian?
Sebastian is Julia? One and the same, methinks.
Oh, how I have wronged her. She has given up her life to come follow me.
And then Proteus realized that he had been a real stinker, a badger of a boy, a monster of a man. No offense intended to badgers and monsters. And he repented and begged Valentine to forgive him.
Why, of course I forgive you. After all, your name is Proteus. It is your very nature.
Sorry, lady, but I can no longer be yours. I know you must be horribly sad.
What?
Perhaps you'll see fit to marry my friend the Bandit King.
What?
Dear friend Valentine, tell me of your love. We shall be wed soon.
What? Not he and I, but I and thee, dear Sylvia.
And so, with Thurio no longer pretending interest in Sylvia, all were free to return to Milan, where they could wed. The two couples would live happily ever after, or so we are led to believe. Starring Nala as...
Lucetta.
Starring Noah as...
Thorio.
Starring Nala as...
Antonio, the father.
Starring Noah as...
Duke of Milan.
Introducing Nala as...
Sylvia.
With Noah as...
Julia.
And the main stars, Valentine and Proteus, as played by...
Noah and Nala. He was such a bad singer anyway.